Okay, so let's move on now to our final team of this release, which is Leviathan. And they finished in 17th. They were, I think, listed at 18th, so they moved up one spot. We have Tuscan, Nightmare Rose, Sicarius, Yazbekistan, and Oddity. Five-person team. Yeah, talk to us about Leviathan, Four Eyes. How did they play and how did they structure up?
Yeah, for some reason, I don't remember too much about these guys. I think it's because I tried avoiding their team as much as I could, knowing that they were a stronger team in a lot of the games that we played. When Guards was making our calls as well, he would try and stay away from that team as well, because, you know, they're quite good pack on pack, great communicators across the maze. Yeah, I kept running into Yazbekistan quite a lot on defense and attack as well. So I'm not sure if he was one of the ones leading the attack or... but yeah, he was definitely... His presence was definitely felt around the maze. As well as Nightmare Rose as well. I think he might have been the one that was leading the plays. Because I did...
Well,
yeah, I did hear a lot of calls coming from him about... who to swap with and who to send out and stuff like that. But yeah, Yaz and Nightmare Rose were definitely around basically everywhere.
Yeah.
And they always had players. Their defense game was quite good too, in terms of positioning, and when nothing was happening at their base, they did have that in-game knowledge to push out and to get those pack points and to fall back when people were coming over to them. So again, you know, definitely one of the better of the bottom 8 teams that I played against, and it shows just in results.
Yeah, I think those Sydney guys are just getting really good at a standard kind of floaty defense, you know, defense oriented, but like we were saying before, where, you know, you might invest too heavily in your defense and then not know when to go aggressive. I think they made very good use of where their defenders were positioned when things weren't happening, to help like consolidate those base takes, you know, with that third person rocking up, or just a third person that's really far away and just shooting that one person on the back door, for instance, and that's the difference of getting a base. So yeah, I think yeah, kudos to those Sydney guys. They're they're just getting really good strategically and just making, you know, making the right plays and stuff. I think you were right in Nightmare Rose being the lead attacker, because he was tagged the most on the team by quite a margin as well. It was like 200 tags or something against. So, and that's typically something that you'll see at Nationals, is if you were to look through the most tag players of the comp, they're usually the in-game leaders of the game, of the teams, because they'll usually be in a position where they want to see stuff, and where if you're in a position where you can see stuff, there's people, and if there's people, they're probably trying to shoot you. And then also there's the thing of like, there's a thing of once you start, you know, you put that in-game leader cap on, you'll get caught out in times where you're thinking about the game rather than, you know, shooting that person in front of you. So you'll see that they might lose like quite a bit of duels. But also, interestingly, if they are doing a good job as a lead attacker, or an in-game leader, they'll also typically have a very, very high tag count as well. So that kind of backs it up. And by the looks, it seems like Tuscan was the opening batsman, you know, one of the first priorities to like go out and get the bases, because he had after Nightmare Rose, he had the second highest base average on the team. Tuscan also had by far like the highest denial, like denials 4. So he was yeah, he was causing trouble everywhere by the looks. So yeah, well, Tuscan. I remember versing him in Darwin Nats, I think, and yeah, he was one of those players that was like, you know, like I was talking about with Grays, where you're like, oh, here we go, here's a new player, I've been playing for ages, and you get, you know, they just like catch you out and they surprise you, and you have to give them props, respect, you know. Tuscan, yeah, very nicely done.
Yeah, I can confirm he was majority of the denies that I got on me at their base, because again, you know, I try I try my best, you know, in every game, but that guy was just catching me out all the time, and it's just like, man, like I'm just like, oh, I just got to sharpen up, you know, like just don't underestimate your competition, really. And yeah, it's just, yeah, he's a great player, and there's definitely potential there if he continues to keep playing. You know, it's only going to get better.
What can you guys tell us about Sicarius? He got a 0.99 GRC, which is really high. Is he a new player, or are they a new player?
I haven't seen the alias before, so I think so, and I don't
Either.
even remember seeing them at any of the pre-nats either.
Yeah, I think from memory, they're a new player as well, and again, you know, they were one of the players that was prioritizing pushing out on defense, because a lot of the time, if I was getting shot on attacking the third team's base, I'd turn around and I'd always see the third team just sniping and, you know, getting those points. So I think he was prioritized as a floater. I'm not too sure. Yeah, he's definitely one of those ones to watch, and just to always be aware of your surroundings, it seems.
Yeah, I do. So I have had an experience of playing a different version of Leviathan in Darwin, because I was playing on the Hurricanes that year, which was in the bottom tier, and we played them quite a lot actually, because we were in the Cascades and everything with them all the way through, and they knocked us out of the tournament in the final game. And I have huge respect for Nightmare Rose as a captain. He was the one of the captains in that bottom tier that I had to consistently play like as good a strategy as possible to beat. Like they were always strategically well set up. They were always making good decisions. They were leaving their base when they needed to. If they were behind, they were going aggressive. They were doing all the things right that they needed to. And Nightmare Rose has actually been around the scene for a long time down there. So he's actually quite experienced, understands the game quite well. So I can definitely see why they finished at the top of that bottom tier, with the having somebody like Nightmare Rose at the helm, kind of giving the direction to those players. And yeah, I've played Tuscan before. I know how good he is around the arena. And that's the thing, right? Like, the difference between players in the top tier and the bottom tier isn't really that much in terms of around the arena. Like, there's some really sharp players around the arena. Quite often the difference is just the number of high-level players increases in the top teams. They've got more depth in their scene to be able to load up their teams with more top-level talent, and then it's cohesion and just and playing together, and in-game decision-making, which is just a function of experience. So, there's no surprises around seeing somebody like Tuscan giving people a bunch of hassles and denying them a lot in that bottom tier. Now everybody's going to know Four Eyes about
no, it's all right.
It's going to be a thing
all
now.
right.
How many memes can we create between now and Hobart, you reckon? That's the challenge for the community. How many Four Eyes denial memes can we possibly create?
Too many.
I think interestingly as well, Leviathan had the best overall climb fall ratio, if you want to call it. So they climbed 4 spots overall. They climbed 3 from round robin to Cascade 1, and then they climbed 1 from Cascade 1 to Cascade 2, and then they only dropped 1 after that. So overall they ended up climbing 3 spots from their original placing, which was the highest of the bottom 8. So that's generally like a testament of the teams that are adapting the best to the arena, and you know, making changes and stuff, not getting caught just doing the same thing over and over again, and you know, making the same mistakes over and over again. So yeah, well done Leviathan. I think in terms of things for them to improve on, I versed them once myself as well. In fact, I might have even sat the game that we versed them, and I didn't ref any games, but from what you boys are saying in that, and from what I know in Sydney in general, of their teams play very strategically, quite smart. They're always making good decisions. Like Bootza was saying, you can't, you know, underestimate these teams, and because if you give them an inch, they'll take it, and you'll be like, oh, you'll regret you gave them that inch. You know, they play quite smart, so it makes you wonder, how can they break into that top tier if they're doing all the right things strategically? And generally, I think that comes down to just the execution, like I was saying before, of the micro things. You know, how many mistakes you're making in your defense. You know, how many times did you drop a base because someone, instead of comming that they're about to take a duel, saying like, I don't know, loading back, they just backed themselves to win that duel. They were like, I've got this. And they didn't say anything. They lose, and then that person goes and shoots everyone because they didn't say anything. You know, how many bases did you drop because of that? How many bases could you have gotten where you got denied because, you know, you maybe didn't call the door that they were coming from early enough? At the end of the day, laser tag's a game of milliseconds and millimeters. So I think the best thing for them to do is to really sharpen up the micro stuff. Something I do at home when we're in training time and developing new skills time and stuff is running like an attack versus defense drill. So just 5 minutes at a base. I usually turn reloads on, you know, infinite base destroys, make the base come up every 10 seconds even after it's destroyed. You just have 3 defenders, 2 attackers, or whatever variation you want. You play for the 5 minutes, but I put an emphasis of, once those 5 minutes is up, having 2 minutes of like a quick review time where each of the players can, you know, go like, oh hey, like we dropped one of those bases because at one point, like maybe the last line was like, oh, I got a really late comm on the back door, and the guy will go like, oh yeah, I don't know why I was that late. I won't do it again, and stuff like that. I think that goes a long way. It's all about the execution. You know, you can play the best strategic game, you can have the smartest people in there, but if you don't have the ability to just back it up in terms of micro plays and stuff, then it's not going to matter. So I think, given that they play strategically quite smart, that would be my guess in terms of like the next thing to really push them into that top tier, and maybe even beyond.
It's one of those principles that's consistent all the way through the ladder, isn't it? Just the getting the fundamentals right and doing the fundamentals on a more consistent basis. Yeah, I know that when we're training people in defense here, I sort of say to the guys, it's a good defensive team. Anybody can defend well for a minute, 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes. A good defensive team can defend impeccably for 12 minutes with minimal mistakes. And that's the thing. It's like being able to maintain a focus of attention for a period of time, for a 12-minute period of time where nothing slips between the cracks. And that really takes work. That takes a lot of training and dedication. So yeah, totally agree with you on that one, mate. And I really hope they continue to play. And it sounds like they've got is Oddity a new player as well? So they've got, what, 2 new players on that team?
Yeah, I'd say so. I don't recognise the alias.
Yeah. Yeah, so hopefully they stick together and see us in Hobart also.
Yeah, I hope they do. Because like I said, you know, I mean, I've said it to a lot of teams, but there's definitely potential there to grow. Like, one thing I tell newer players over here is like, there's no wrong way to play laser tag, but once you get your fundamentals down, and you know, just the minor things, the really small things can make the biggest difference, you know. So yeah, completely agree with you guys on that one.
I call it a game of 1%ers, and you've just got to collect like 121 percenters until your game's like 120% better. But it's a bit like that. And every time you go to a nationals, you pick up another half a dozen or so, and before you know it, you're climbing up the ladder.